Lesson one, right? The first lesson that I'm going to share with you, if you observe and you study the Art of War using as a case study, Nazi attack on Russia. There is no one inflexible, sacred, inviolable strategy. Right? Hitler was sticking to his master strike strategy. That is a mistake. Japan too. Japan stuck to a master plan. And I have a short clip for you. All right, on what Japan did. They had a 4-phase master plan. Now, lesson 2, all right? What is the second lesson you can draw from this episode, this so costly episode on human lives? The Nazis, although technologically superior, and they are prepared long and in secret for war, they had overestimated themselves and underestimated the enemy, Europe and USA. So never underestimate the competition. Lesson 3. The Nazis' methods of fighting have become repetitive. And therefore you could predict what the Nazis are going to do next. And the Russians would then be able to counter this Nazi methods of fighting. The Americans made the same mistake when they went to Vietnam, repeating procedures of war from manuals. Next, lesson 4. Could you guess what lesson 4 is? Nazis had used fear as a strategy of mass control. And when they start massacring the innocent, and thus they have awakened the Russian bear. The whole fighting spirit of the people were out against the Germans. Never do that. Because right, once you awaken the whole people against you, you're not likely to win the war. Lesson 5. Nazis failed to appreciate the ground or the terrain. Nazis even failed to account for winter. Hitler repeated the mistake of Napoleon. Napoleon did the same big mistake. They attacked Russia during it, and Hitler had not learned from the past, from history. And Nazis were only prepared for conventional fighting. They were bogged down instead, when they fight conventionally, by guerrilla warfare. A guerrilla warfare that was inspired by the Russian people. Now we have lesson 6. Right? Nazis lost the battles when the supply lines were cut. Supply is so important. No soldier can fight on empty stomach. Human beings still need food. Right? So they ignore one of the basic principles of Sun Tzu. Estimating distances, ensuring supplies. That is so fundamental. It's unbelievable that the Germans overlooked that point. And the Nazis would lure, lesson 7, to fight deep inside enemy's territory. Here the Russian has history on their side. The Nazi was drawn so deep in that it planned strategic withdrawal was no longer possible, even if they had planned it, right? Because they have fought too deeply into Russian soil. Now, Russia is such a huge country, and they've gone right inside, right? So even if there is a planned strategic withdrawal, it will be very difficult to implement. And of course, look at this slide that I'm showing you now, and you see how, right? As the German penetrated, right, and you find that they actually, right, the Russians actually defended, drew back, and the further they go, the harder it will be for the Nazis to sustain the attack. Nazis had mistaken victory in terms of capturing more land, and land is in fact the prize. Is it? For the Nazis, it was the prize. For the Russians, right, they let the Nazis gain territory instead of fighting to their deaths. So Russian used territory as part of their strategy. In art of war, territory is but one resource for waging war. They should have looked at land to be fluid, just like the desert. The desert is fluid like the sea. Rommel did that in fighting the British, right, in Egypt. How? He treated the vast expanse of the desert as sea, and they actually were very mobile. Rommel was mobile. Mobility was important. Nazis scaled wall cities in attacking the Russians. This is what I call inferior strategy. Sun Tzu would say it's inferior strategy. Leningrad showed that the will of the people could even move the heavens. Out of the blue, the lakes were frozen, and that provided the Russians with the ability to lay railway track across. Very important principle is people win wars. Next lesson, lesson 8, planned withdrawal. Planned withdrawal is integral to deep strategy. Nazis failed to realize this critical point. Hitler refused to accept failure on the Russian front. For him, there was no question of failure. He had simply to win. So one thing we have learned, whatever strategy you formulate, there should always be a withdrawal, a possibility of failure. And what would you do if you fail? So planned withdrawal is integral to deep strategic thinking. And this is a critical point, and refusal to accept failure doesn't mean to say you will not fail, right? Lesson number 9. The Nazis were unbeatable when they executed swift, tight, fast strategy, when they're making chessboard style moves. But the moment it becomes prolonged, the Nazi faced severe difficulties. Lesson 10, Nazi waged a war of terror and annihilation. Right? Sun Tzu had advised in his Art of War 2,500 years ago, let the enemy escape. Do not push them to the limits. They may then be transformed. They may then fight ruthlessly without fear of dying. And when that happens, all right, ordinary people get transformed to be soldiers. Concubine can be transformed to fighters, right, in Sun Tzu's mind. So with no fear of dying, the kamikaze pilots, for example, is one example of what can happen when pilots, when soldiers no longer fear to die. Lesson 11, Nazis forgot in strategy key changes in terms of time, changes in terms of space, changes in terms of people. All these are critical variables in Art of War. So you find that as time passes, morale starts to go down for the German army. Why? Because they're fighting in foreign territory. Instead, for the Russians, it was the reverse. As the war get prolonged, the Russians get more and more determined to fight, to get rid of the Germans. Lesson number 12. We are at 12 now. Russians had repelled European invaders using Moscow winter and scorched earth strategy. Scorched earth strategy meaning they burn up everything, they use fire, destroy everything. So when you come to take over the city, you got nothing left to take. Or you look at it from Sun Tzu's point of view, heaven and earth. Sun Tzu mentioned these 2 key principles. And imagine the Russian winter. Just have a look at the past photographs, how much the German army has suffered trying to battle in Russia's winter. And Nazis relied on the maxim, might is right. People, however, are more powerful than the might of weapons. Right? Lesson 13, right? The Nazis failed to follow Sun Tzu's prescription. treat the prisoners well. What did the Nazis do? They murdered them all, tortured them. Right? It's unbelievable what the Nazis did. And was so cruel to the prisoners. Right, at this point, we take a break and I'll continue with the other lessons, remaining lessons in the next presentation.